Even the manufacturer at some point has issues and sometimes not worth buying parts from. And now let me explain and give you a story. I think it was like a 2005 Ford 500 that came in, and the guy had a battery light on. So I checked the charging system and it was not, it was like 12.7 volts running. And then loaded, it would drop down to like 12.1 volts. Something was definitely wrong. So I check my connections to the alternator. I make sure that the computer's seeing what it needs to see and there's no faults there. And then I contact Ford hotline and I asked them for their recommendations because I could not find anything wrong with this alternator. I replaced it. Everything led back to the alternator being bad. And I put another Ford manufacturer specified part back in that vehicle. So I put the alternator in and the charge came up, but it came up like 13.8, 13.9 volts, and that was loaded. Normal operating was like 14.2, something like that. So I said, man, everything's working right here. Why is the charge light still staying up on the dash? So obviously the alternator was bad, but the charge light kept popping up on the dash, and it was just moments after starting the vehicle it would pop up. The vehicle was not liking something that it was seeing. So I follow the pinpoint test and I'm checking my circuits, my reference voltage, all this other stuff. I'm checking everything that the pinpoint test says to check to make sure everything's legit, and it seems like it's legit, but something was breaking down somewhere. So I get back on the Ford hotline database and I talk to one of the engineers, and they're like, look, man, we're gonna send you another alternator, try it out, see if it works. The issue is, in mid 2000, early 2000, we went through a bad slew of voltage regulators that were in these alternators, and we don't know how many are actually still out there on the shelf. So when you order the Ford alternator, you could be getting one of those ones that did not have a good manufactured voltage regulator. Now, some of you may know more about this particular situation. Some of the OGs that have been in the field for a while have experienced exactly this, because even guys today, when I have this conversation with them and I tell them my horror story, they're like, at least you only went through 7 alternators, where some of us went through a dozen of them trying to get the right one before we actually did get the right one. So some of the guys that have been in the field longer than me had experienced this on more than just one vehicle in mid 2000. And so they sent me another one, I put it in, same thing, charge light pops up on the dash. Then they said, there's another option. We're going to send you an updated pigtail, and we're going to send you a Denso, I think it was a Denso alternator. Denso or Delphi, I think it was Denso. Somebody correct me here, but I don't know what their alternate brand is whenever the OEM one's not working. So they send me a either Denso or Delphi alternator and an updated pigtail, and you gotta splice in 2 of the wires, but you gotta change them because the connector and the voltage regulator are different on how they operate. So you gotta switch the wires. And this is that alternator where you gotta like pull the inner fender liner out, and you gotta go through the back of the motor on the passenger side, and you gotta do your work in the wheel well. I mean, it's kind of a bear to get back in there, but you can get in there. You just have to get used to being somewhat of a contortionist to actually work in this little tight spot. So I put the new alternator they send me. I splice in the pigtail exactly. They had me take pictures and send it to the engineer, and the engineer was like, you did it correctly. What's going on now? And I said, it's charge light, man. It's putting out enough voltage and stuff, but the computer's still not seeing something that it likes to see. I went through like 7 alternators total, and finally got tired of messing with this, and I ordered the factory pigtail back because I had cut into the other one several times just to make sure that everything was correct, and I had enough. So I put a factory pigtail back on it, wired it back in the way that it was, and called Autozone up because they were the closest one to us, and said, send me one of your gold premium alternators. Bolted that Autozone Gold premium alternator down in there, put everything back to factory, charge light went out, vehicle never came back. Customer was super happy because they had taken it to somebody else to look at it before, and they couldn't find anything wrong with it. Even the alternator, when they bench tested it, seemed to be completely fine. They just couldn't, the mom and pop shop that they took it to, good people, just couldn't get to the bottom of it. It ended up being, even the alternate alternator didn't work, the factory alternator didn't work, and going to a Chinese-made Autozone Gold fixed the problem. Took the charge light out, everything was completely fine, no issue at all. Maybe some of you had this experience as well, but sometimes there's horror stories even with the manufactured parts. What do you guys think? Well, have you, any of you, experienced this situation before? Because I sure have. Several occasions I've experienced something like this. I got more stories. This is just one specifically that, man, I ate up a lot of time, and Ford actually picked up the bill even though it was out of warranty because of their part. They actually sent me the pay for my labor hours going into this because they understood the situation, and they made an exception to pay for this customer's repair because they realized that it was a manufacturing fault on their part. And the sad thing is, some of those Ford mid-2000 alternators with those bad voltage regulators are still out there today. They said that they don't even know how many got missed and accounted for that are still on the shelf, and some of them being sold. Anybody else experience something like this?